Number 2, abolitionist bill. To be an abolitionist bill, that it has to have 0 exceptions for abortion. So 0, like, okay, we're abolishing abortion except for in this case. So 0 exception. So what are the general exceptions that we see in pro-life bills?
Mm-hmm. Right. So. I think the most frequent one we see is the rape exception. That one comes up probably the most. And that's probably the one that people are always talking about, whether they're pro-life or pro-choice or whatever. It's those are the ones that they think are just the easiest sell to the culture, because our culture doesn't value fatherless children all that much. And so
in the guise of wanting to be compassionate to women who were unjustly, one, that violence was done against them, a great evil thing was done against them. And then there's this child that was conceived in the process. And I think that for some people, it's like a desire to sort of empathize with her.
Yeah.
Of course, it doesn't help her to kill the baby. It doesn't unrape her. But I think the pro-lifer is wanting to put an exception in their bill, not just because they're sympathizing, but they're thinking, this is the only way I'm going to get this passed.
Yeah.
So in some cases, I mean, there are pro-lifers who include a rape exception just to get the thing passed. And there are also pro-lifers who, as a principle, think it should be legal in the case of rape.
Yeah.
That's not an uncommon
That's
thing.
true. I mean, I think a lot of normal pro-life people, like, I'll see comments, and a lot of times these comments will start out with, I am 100% pro-life, but I don't think that you should take away an abortion for someone who's been raped.
Yeah.
Because and it's because they're not really thinking you have a human being there, you can't murder humans.
Yeah.
They're thinking, well,
it's kind of weird. It's like, because I saw this on a pro-life website a while back, and I was really annoyed about it, and I was like, we need to, cause a big stink about this. I was talking to my boss about it, like, because this is ridiculous that it's on there, and it's kind of the same type of, like, we don't want to be stepping on toes and stuff like that. But Pro-Life San Francisco, if you want to check it out, they have on their website, our leadership is divided on the question of whether or not we should be able to murder a fatherless child.
Did they say it that way?
Exactly that way. Yeah.
We're undecided about whether it's okay to murder fatherless children. They usually euphemize it completely, right? Like,
well, I mean, I think they even say that it's because of Thompson's argument, Judith Travers Thompson's argument. The violinist.
Some of us buy into the violinist argument or something like that.
Yeah, with rape. Only.
Yeah,
and
because she didn't choose. She woke up and she was pregnant.
Yeah, she didn't choose to be in that situation,
which is a horrible situation. But again, the abolitionist perspective is you have an image bearer there. They did not do anything to deserve the death penalty. You cannot punish them. So better to help a mother in that situation. Help her, surround her with love. Do what you can to make sure that the child is adopted if she's not going to raise a child. But you never punish a child for the crimes of the father, and you never get rid of a person simply because of how inconveniencing or even how painful they're going to cause your life. You can't.
Well, it's really, I think it's kind of ironic that the culture right now is rejecting the death sentence ever for convicted rapists and murderers and things like that, but it's the child that gets the axe in this case. So it's it's such a hypocritical, just disgusting thing. Let's kill this child, but no, let's not, condemn to death anyone who would rape a woman and create a fatherless child. Which is really disgusting.
Yeah, our culture is such a social justice addicted culture, but really what it is that we hate justice. So whenever you have a serial murderer rapist on death row, the people who are like, it's wrong to kill him, are the people who are like, it's okay to kill the baby conceived in rape. The completely innocent child, you can kill them, but the completely guilty adult, you can't kill them. So it's flipped around, and it's because they hate justice, which justice would demand the death of the criminal, of the murderer, and justice would demand the protection of the child. But this weird, just insane empathy, like you have empathy
false
for
empathy.
The false empathy. I
think that's what insane.
It's just like, you care so much for the mother that you think that you want to help her by violently destroying the baby that was conceived in the act. You care so much for the criminal, you think it's going to help them and society to preserve them and pay for them for the rest of their life in jail. When it doesn't really help the mother, it doesn't really help society. But we're getting off on all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that is generally, they want to, for whatever reason, they want to include a rape, incest exception. An abolitionist bill that's trying to abolish abortion doesn't include those exceptions. And before we move on to the health of the life of the mother, I do want to say that, like, if you include a rape exception, and why an abolitionist bill couldn't do that because we're trying to abolish abortion, but if you were to say abolish all abortions except for in the case of rape, how would that even be legislated? Like, how someone wants to get an abortion, you just have to say, I was raped. And then the doctor in our culture is going to be like, well, but were you? I mean, he's going to be Me Too'd, immediately. I mean, you can't, that person goes and says, I have to abort this baby because I'm raped. I mean, you would have people going to get abortions, and the father of the child, being willing to say, like, well, I don't want to raise this baby. Just say the baby was conceived in rape. And there'd be no way of legislating it. Now someone says, well, we could require that they do a criminal thing or something like that, and that you have to prove that it was a rape or so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But it's just so hard to legislate that what's really going on is to keep abortion legal for rape victims, you're going to have to basically keep abortion legal. And that exception basically keeps it all legal because you can't do anything. Yeah. And regardless, most babies are not being murdered in the womb because of rape. Yeah. It's just not.
And so with the rape exception, you've got the same issues as with, say, like an exception for babies prior to 20 weeks. You've got intrinsic injustice in the bill saying you can murder human beings in this instance.
Right.
And then you've also got the secondary educational effect that has, right? And Sam, you were at a school in California, and you're doing anti-abortion outreach, and a girl comes up and says, what does your group say about abortion in the case of rape? And you explain to her why, it's still the killing of an innocent human being. You explain all that, and she starts crying, and she says, like, what was it? You remember?
She said that, thank you for saying it, because I said I don't believe that it's ever okay to punish a child for the sins of the father. And she said, well, thank you for saying that. She's crying. She says, thank you for saying that because I was conceived in rape. Right. She said that she had felt devalued by so many of her friends because they were saying that she was an example of somebody that it's okay to kill because her father was horrible.
Yeah.
I think James has probably actually told that story more than I have.
Yeah, no. Well, no, but think about how many, I mean, it's awful, but it's this sinful culture that we live in, but everybody knows somebody who was conceived in rape. Everybody knows tons of people who were not conceived in love by choice, there's just, and so I think that people who were conceived in rape, whether they were raised by their mothers or adopted, in a culture where you constantly have, oh, well, we're gonna fight abortion because we're Christians, except for we're gonna leave it legal for babies conceived in rape. It's like, what the heck are you telling me? Like, I should, and I think that this is kind of a weird problem for pro-life legislators and pro-life leaders whenever they're wanting to, stump for a bill that's got a rape exception in it, but at the same time get, rape conceived children speaking on their stages.
It's weird too, because how do you even advertise that to a group of people that you're trying to get this passed? Like, how does these pro-life legislators go out and say, this bill is great, we're going to allow you to murder rape conceived babies? Like, knowing what they know about their demographics too, it's like, it's so weird that they would even throw it in there in the first place.
Well, there is something that was it the Abby Johnson? She's talking in Texas, and there's a bill in Texas too. I think it was a 20-week ban, right? And it had a rape exception. Yeah. And she says, "Now I know this has some exceptions, but don't get in a tizzy." Yeah. It has a rape exception, but don't get in a tizzy. Yeah. And so that's kind of how they have to treat those situations. Yeah, well,
because they want to base it. And I think that when they say that, a lot of the pro-lifers who are themselves, they don't want people murdering children for rape. There's this weird thing that happens in their sort of mind that's always thinking about numbers. Like, how do we save the most? How do we do the most good? How much evil are we going to allow? And so they're willing to support this bill and not get into a tizzy because it does some good.
Yeah.
And then the thing is what happens is they end up calling that bill good and saying that we shouldn't get mad about this evil. It's kind of like saying, here, I baked this pie for you. It's a chocolate pie. Now, 2% of it is dog crap, but don't get into a tizzy about it. Eat the pie.
Don't call the health inspector.
It's just kind of like this is this really bad thing that we all agree is a really bad thing, but don't freak out about it.
Yeah.
And
I think that's one of the clearest demonstrations of that Hyrek quote that you like so much, James. It says that these iniquitous decrees, they actually abate the anger of the people.
Yeah.
And this is a pro-life leader saying you shouldn't be so angry about this injustice that we're putting into law.
Yeah.
Like advocating for you to be less angry about the fact that we're murdering.
Yeah.
You're committing a genocide against an entire generation of people.
Yeah.
And we should just not get so mad about that one exception.
Devaluing people, telling the cultures that it's okay to devalue people based on where they're from. I mean, come on, it just smacks against everything. But yeah, it's the educational effect of it alone. And in the Hyrek quote about like kind of debases our moral outrage that should be. If there was like a bill, like if in the state of Texas, for instance, you weren't allowed to have abortions except for in the case of rape.
Yeah.
And that was like, say, 5,000 human beings a year. Like, and only 5,000 babies were being aborted in Texas. And it was all because they were conceived in rape. Christians should be having a conniption about that. Like, we literally should be freaking out about the literal least of these, the fatherless child being led away to death because of something they didn't do.
Yeah.
Like that is something that Christians should be fighting for, not Christians should be standing up and saying, well, don't freak out, everybody.
Yeah.
And of course, this is, that's a pro-life thing, not an abolitionist thing.
But it does show how much like identity politics have just infected our, like the pro-life movement's approach, because they do it in both ways. They go, let's get rid of Down syndrome abortions because so many Down syndrome babies are being aborted, and let's get rid of, and they'll go after these people groups, like if we could find the gay gene, would we save all the gay kids type stuff. And that's like that infects so much of their reasoning because it's all focused on groups and like just identity groups and stuff like that. But you're not focusing on the fact that any murder of a preborn child should not be tolerated. That's wicked. It's evil. Don't allow it. Which
kind of goes with this first component and the second component. If you just said, anytime there's a human being there, you cannot murder them. Full stop. No exception. The moment you have a human, you cannot murder them.
Yeah.
Just simple. It's consistent. And if you don't do that for pragmatic reasons or for false empathy reasons, if you don't do it, your bill is going to fail.
Yeah.
So that's why. So those are number one. Number two, I guess we should talk. One of the exceptions that is often brought up is actually the life, health of the mother, and pro-lifers not only write that exception into all their bills because they think they have to get them passed, or because they know somebody who's been in a serious situation, but they actually will use that as an argument against our bills. So an abolitionist bill does not include an exception to, murder a child for the health of the mother or for the life of the mother.
Right. And so this is a very nuanced point, but a really important one. And so first off, I guess off the top, we should deal with health of the mother. And it's important to understand what that is. So the idea that abortion is legal for the health of the mother comes actually not from Roe v. Wade, but comes from Doe v. Bolton, which is kind of the companion case of Roe v. Wade, also decided in 1973. And it basically established that health of the mother includes psychological health, includes familial health, includes basically anything. Like you can just say, I'm very stressed.
Yeah.
Boom.
Having this baby would lead me to such despair that I'd kill myself.
Right. Or it would cause, my boyfriend to leave me, or it would, cause any sort of familial trouble.
Change my body through weight gain and
right.
Yeah. Anything
counts as health of the mother. So that one has to be immediately rejected as just this thing that allows abortion for pretty much any reason.
When you see in a bill health of the mother, you can drive a bus through it. It's got all the same abortions. So run.
Yeah. And so life of the mother, the reason we don't include a life of the mother exception is because when you include a blanket exception for something like that, what you get is kind of what you touched on earlier, people can, I mean, it's a loophole that can be exploited very easily. A doctor can say, well, here's some condition that could potentially cause some harm, and so for that we're going to do it. And you see that with other things, like for marijuana, you have to have a medical condition in Oklahoma to get a marijuana card. But every doctor is just like, oh, okay, you said your hand hurts a little bit.
What's your medical condition?
Right.
I'm human. Oh, here's some dope.
Right.
Yeah. It's the condition can be just open to anything.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So like the health of the mother easily, but even the life of the mother one.
It can be abused as a loophole.
It can be abused, but I think we should talk about now there is obviously, since the fall of man and just what it's happened to us biologically, sin entering the world, and just it's a bad, evil things happen naturally. And so definitely it is true that babies sometimes are forming in the womb in places that are dangerous, both for the child, oftentimes mainly for the child because of where they're developing in relation to where they're at in the fallopian tube, if they're on the outside of the tube or if they're too high up or something like that, that they can possibly develop to a certain size, a rupture, and it's harmful to the mother. That is something that happens. It's not like we're saying there aren't situations where a mother's life could be in danger.
Right.
But why would we not include like explicitly in the bill, like something about that?
Right. And so Senate Bill 13, which is the abolition bill we had here in Oklahoma, it had a clause that was not exactly identical, but nearly identical to the language from the triage section of the healthcare Oklahoma codes.
Yeah.
And they put it in SB 13. And basically what it says is that a doctor is not liable for any sort of criminal act if he or she has done everything at his disposal to save the life of the child and the mother, and the child passes away. Like a doctor who does what he can to save the child's life in an emergency situation and, is not able to, is not going to go away for murder.
Yeah.
Now, the intentional use of it to just murder right off the bat and not even make an attempt to treat both human beings as human beings,
that's what would be prohibited.
Right, that's prohibited.
Yeah.
But if you make a good faith attempt to save both lives and the child doesn't survive, you're not going away for murder. And so that clause is in Senate Bill 13. Mm-hmm. And so it's not a blanket exception that can be abused, but it is something that recognizes there are situations where the doctor is not going to be able to save both human beings.
It's not an exception for abortion.
Right.
It's an acknowledgement of the reality of these situations. And I think that it's disingenuous when people bring it up, because clearly there's something completely different about someone who's like, oh, I've got a baby, I'm going to go kill it, and somebody who's losing a child because of a miscarriage. Right. Now, if you go in and you're getting your 18-week ultrasound, your second ultrasound to check out the baby, and the doctor says, wow, this baby is very likely not going to make it, and we may have to do a D&E and remove this child because you're in danger. In a state where abortion was abolished, the doctor would say, you're in danger, this is a serious situation, you would go onto bed rest, and they would do everything in their power to monitor the situation to protect the child from death, the mother from death, and to be there ready for anything that happened. Doctors would be required to be doctors, to keep the Hippocratic Oath and do no harm. Now, in our world right now, I fear, and I know, because you run into people who have this story and it's just heartbreaking. And they say, well, what about abortion in the case of an ectopic pregnancy? And in our culture right now, where abortion is completely legal on demand, I think a doctor sometimes looks at it. It may or may not be ectopic. It may be ectopic and okay, because babies are born from ectopic pregnancies. Sometimes you watch and wait and everything's fine. But I think that when abortion is so easy and accessible and it's the go-to answer, instead of watching, waiting, praying, being at the ready to help the child, being at the ready to help the mother, it's go abort this baby and then let's try again. That is the way that a law with the life of the mother exception and that education has that effect.
It enables that.
It enables it and encourages it. And really, they've done some scientific studies. You can treat this situation.
Yeah.
Like there are medical procedures that could be developed and worked on to be able to help children in ectopic situations.
Right. And those aren't always successful. Actually, they've very rarely been successful, though they have been successful. It's rare. But right now, they're not even trying to develop those
Why
procedures.
would you research that procedure and develop the procedure when you can just kill that baby,
just have an easy solution,
and then try for another child?
And so abolishing abortion will actually have the effect of improving the care for ectopic pregnancies.
Yeah. So if you're concerned about the life of the mother situation, truly concerned, then you'd want to pass a bill abolishing abortion as murder that had the triage in there, but at the same time was going to be serious about it and encourage the medical establishment to figure out what to do. So again, when we're looking at these bills, it's not just like what their effect on the law, it's their effect on the wider culture. And in this case, that'd be the effect on the medical community. And I know people may be watching this or listening to this, and I don't want to be insensitive, but we do live in a culture where people have killed their babies, like their ectopic, just unnecessarily, just willy-nilly killed them and think that they're doing the right thing when they may not have been.
Right. Likely because the doctors resort to that right away without making any attempt.
Yeah.
Well, I've talked to so many people that said, I had a completely terminal diagnosis when I was in the womb, and my mom talked to 6 doctors, and they all said, you're going to have to abort. Still here. There's this guy at Cleveland State University. He was completely blind, but he was studying French. He was getting his degree. He was doing like fine other than the blindness, but they said that he was going to die and he wasn't going to make it. And he's still here. Yeah. That's like one of many, many cases.
Because I think, and whenever we went in to do my son's ultrasound and he was going to have spina bifida and all that, and, the person, kind of lets us know, okay, you're at 18 weeks. If you were going to do something, we're like, shut your mouth. It's kind of like, you got to get it done before 20 weeks because the pro-lifer said you got to abort your baby before 20 weeks. Well, that sort of situation isn't like a life of the mother, but it's like your child could be messed up. So we would also not make an exception to abort babies with severe fetal abnormalities.
Yeah.
Which I think is a lot, like when you look at the late abortions, a lot of them are whenever at some point in time you've detected something very wrong. Like when your baby's born, they're going to immediately need surgery. They're going to immediately need this, and their quality of life is not going to be great. And then parents abort them. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, how do we deal with people who need help? Murder them.
Yeah.
So again, in our culture, when you make these exceptions, you devalue those human beings who you should be loving, showing compassionate care for, and you just kill them. So an abolition bill, of course, says, no, we want to protect all humans from the moment of conception without exception, regardless of all the situations and everything about how they were conceived.